Well, good evening, Cedar Falls. Welcome to our regular council meeting for May 2nd, 2022. I'll now call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding. Gamfield.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Councilmember Harding, absent, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And he did mention he would be out at a concert, unavoidable tonight, so we will miss his opinions tonight. So with that, is there a motion to approve the minutes for April 18th?
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Any from public? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That does pass. And Madam Clerk, do we have any agenda revisions tonight?
Mr. Mayor, I have no agenda revisions.
Okay, thank you very much. Tonight for special presentations, I have quite a few tonight. There's 8 of them. And some of these are required for certifications and awards. And so I'm very happy to read these this evening, but just bear with me for the time a little bit. I'm going to go behind the podium on the other side. So we have a few tonight that we'll be issuing, first being a proclamation recognizing May 1st through 7th, 2022 as National Travel and Tourism Week. And with that, I have Jennifer Picar. You can come forward, please. So Jennifer is our Tourism Director. What's your exact title?
Tourism and Cultural Programs Manager.
Tourism and Cultural Programs Manager. So we will have this opportunity to read the proclamation, and it says, National Travel and Tourism Week, May 1st through 7th, 2022. Whereas tourism will remain a consistent driver of Cedar Falls' economy and workforce, and whereas a robust travel industry provides significant economic benefits for the nation, generating more than $2.6 trillion in economic output prior to the pandemic, with $1.2 trillion spent directly by travelers in the United States. And whereas travel has been the foundation of a healthy workforce, serving as one of the largest private sector employers in the U.S., supporting 17 million jobs prior to the pandemic. And whereas spending by travelers has aided state and local governments alike, generating $90 billion in state and local tax revenue prior to the pandemic to support essential services. And whereas promoting America as a premier destination for global travelers is more important than ever as we recover from steep losses. And whereas the future of travel is connecting the U.S. with the global community and safely and securely welcoming back international travelers to every U.S. community, including ours. And whereas the rebound of travel will drive the rebuilding of the U.S. economy, since prior to the pandemic, 60% of leisure and hospitality employment was small business. And whereas the future of travel will prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, powering a future that values all cultures, embraces new perspectives, and reflects the faces and ideas of the full American society. And whereas visitors coming from at least 50 miles away made over 850,000 trips to Cedar Falls in 2021, as reported by the Cedar Falls Visitors and Tourism Bureau. Now, therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of the City of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim May 1st through 7th, 2022 as National Travel and Tourism Week in Cedar Falls. And I encourage all citizens to recognize the critical role that travel and tourism plays in Cedar Falls and the Cedar Valley. Signed this 25th day of April, 2022, Mayor Robert M. Green. So, Jennifer, this I'm very happy to provide to the Visitors and Tourism Bureau. And do you have any words for us tonight you'd want to share? I don't want to put you on the spot.
That's okay. We're just looking forward to a really busy summer travel season. We're seeing our numbers here for visitors pick up throughout the year, and we look forward to that continuing throughout the year.
Excellent, thank you. And I received a voicemail today from a visitor whose son is starting with one of the area government agencies. It's his first job out of college. They were coming in from out of the city, and this voicemail said how impressed this visitor was for the thoughtfulness of, it was actually a Walmart employee who helped fix their car, the son's car. And then just as they go through the community, they said, you have such a welcoming and friendly people, and you should be extremely proud of that. And so I just want to make sure residents know that you certainly are the ambassadors of our city, And with all of your interactions, especially if it's someone you'd not met before, please put on an extra smiling face because one, they may need it, and two, you'll be setting the tone and giving possibly the best impression that they may receive of the city, maybe the only impression they receive of the city. So everyone's an ambassador, and I look forward to a very active travel and tourism season this year. So next is one of my favorites every year. It's Municipal Clerks Week. Jackie, so come on over. Thank you, ma'am. Dun, dun, dun. Professional Municipal Clerks Week, May 1st through 7th, 2022. Whereas the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world. And whereas the Professional Municipal Clerk is the oldest among public servants, not you personally. Whereas the city clerk provides the professional link between the citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels. And whereas professional municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. And whereas the professional municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community, and whereas professional municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the clerk's office through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, provincial, county, and international professional organizations. And whereas the clerk of the city of Cedar Falls, Miss Jackie Danielson, is highly knowledgeable, all around awesome, and worthy of celebration. Now therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of the city of Cedar Falls, do hereby recognize the week of May 1st through May 7th, 2022 as Municipal Clerks Week, and further extend the people's appreciation to our city clerk and to all professional municipal clerks for the vital services they perform and for their exemplary dedication to the communities they represent. Signed this 25th day of April, 2022, Mayor Robert M. Green. So,
Thank you, Mayor.
the next is a proclamation that we first started issuing last year. It's National Astronaut Day. Whereas 61 years ago, on May 5th, 1961, Alan Shepard became the first American in space aboard NASA's Freedom 7 Mercury spacecraft, ushering the United States into the era of American manned spaceflight. And whereas our city joined the ranks of astronaut hometowns in 2020 with the graduation of Cedar Falls native Raja Chari to NASA's astronaut corps, and we have proudly cheered on Raja and his family during his 6-month mission to the International Space Station as the SpaceX Crew 3 commander and as flight engineer for Expedition 66 and 67. And whereas America's commitment to and investment in manned spaceflight will lead to many opportunities for innovative engineers, scientists, technicians, and other professionals and workers in the decades ahead. And whereas astronauts embody the highest ideals of leadership, teamwork, integrity, discipline, problem solving, and excellence under pressure, and these traits are worthy of emulation by Cedar Falls citizens young and old alike. Now therefore I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of the city of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim May 5th, 2022 as National Astronaut Day throughout the city, and I encourage citizens to learn about and appreciate the legacy and future of manned spaceflight, and to celebrate and emulate the astronauts who have worked tirelessly to put humanity into orbit, and to the moon, and to the Mars and beyond. Signed this 25th day of April 2022, Mayor Robert M. Green. I would give this proclamation to Raja Chari, but he's in space right now. He's not due back until the 4th, so I was trying to get him to come back down early, but we'll have to give him the proclamation next year. I very much hope to have him here next year for the personal receipt of the proclamation. Next tonight is World Migratory Bird Day. So Lorene Wellnitz, are you here tonight for us? Hi, Lorene. World Migratory Bird Day, Saturday, May 14th, 2022. Whereas nature lovers across the globe are celebrating World Migratory Bird Day on May 14th, 2022 to affirm humanity's shared moral responsibility to protect, preserve, and nurture bird life around the world. And whereas Cedar Falls was officially designated in 2020 as Iowa's 7th bird-friendly city by the Bird Friendly Iowa organization, and is working with Waterloo and other Iowa cities to improve environmental conditions necessary for the health and welfare of nesting and migratory birds. And whereas Cedar Falls is taking measures to educate and engage people in birding and wildlife conservation, particularly through the North Cedar Natural Resource Area and the strong advocacy of North Cedar conservationists, thank you. And whereas more than 300 migratory and resident bird species use the various habitats in Cedar Valley for feeding and nesting, and whereas promoting abundant, sustainable bird populations and healthy habitats benefits our world's biodiversity, economy, and human society. Now, therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of the City of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim May 14th, 2022 as World Migratory Bird Day throughout the city, and I urge all citizens to celebrate this observance and to support efforts to protect and conserve birds and their habitats in our community and the world at large throughout the year. Signed this 25th day of April, 2022, Mayor Robert M. Green. So I'll give that to you here. Ta-da. And Laureen, do you have a few words for us tonight?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So, thank you, Mayor and Council, for realizing the importance of Migratory Bird Day, and also the BEE, the Bee Lawn Initiative, and also the emphasis on Cedar Falls being a bird-friendly community. You, Council, are progressive, and you have put your feet where your mouth is, because several Saturdays ago, many of you were out in the ditches picking up litter in the Clean Up Cedar Valley Initiative. So thank you again. So the bird migration is zooming. This is prime time for them to come north. We're in the Mississippi Flyway. Even though it's 100 miles from the Mississippi, hundreds of species fly overhead in the month of May. And they're so colorful. We've got warblers, orioles, vireos. Some of the great places to bird in our area are Big Woods Lake, Black Hawk County Park, Prairie Parkway, George Wythe State Park, Hartman Reserve Nature Center, the bike trails, the UNI campus. In fact, this Wednesday morning at 8:30 at Hartman Nature Center, there's going to be a field trip sponsored by the Prairie Rapids Audubon Society. You're guaranteed to see at least 60 species there. Free, just bring your binoculars, meet in the Hartman parking lot. And also, I just wanted to remind you some of the conservation things we all can be doing. We can go to classes. Some are at the Cedar Falls Library or the CEEE at UNI, or we could go on that practical backyard tour in June. Some of you could change your turf grass to prairie. Some of the businesses in the industrial park have already done this, and 7 families along Dry Run Creek have formed rain gardens that contain native species and make for better habitat. Also, by the UNI new practice fields, they've planted native prairie mix, and that's going to provide habitat and also improve our water quality. And another, this is huge. I couldn't believe this. I had to look it up twice. Keep your cats indoors. 2 billion birds in the United States die a year from cats. And the other huge killer of birds are window strikes. So when a tree reflects into your window, the bird thinks it's another tree and they go zooming into it and they die. So there are strips you can put on your windows to prevent birds flying in. You can always plant native shrubs and trees. Native is good, but as exotic is not so good. So take the ginkgo tree, that's exotic. It's really cute, it has these triangular leaves, but not a single bird lands in it or eats off of it. On the other hand, trees like the native hackberry or the oak or the crabapple, they're host to butterflies and birds. It makes sense, and those trees are beautiful too. Okay, so just because the birds are here today, we can't take it for granted. Remember the passenger pigeon. No one imagined them going extinct. And all we can ask is that you be a caring, concerned citizen. Stop when you hear a bird song. It might even be sending you a message, maybe even a love song. Thank you.
Thank you, Laureen. Our next proclamation tonight is for May 15th through 21st, 2022 as National Police Week. Oh, here you are. Let's take that one. Start over again. We'll have National Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day on May 15th through 21st, 2022 and the Memorial Day as Sunday, May 15th, 2022. So if I could have, the Director or Acting Chief Howard with us tonight to receive the proclamation. Thank you, sir. And the proclamation reads, whereas more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serve in communities across the United States, including 72 sworn law enforcement officers, now 73, right?
Soon.
Okay. And 12 reserve officers in the city of Cedar Falls, alongside dozens more in the Waterloo Police Department, UNI Department of Public Safety, and Black Hawk County Sheriff's Office. And whereas our community is constantly grateful to these officers, as well as to those in surrounding cities who provide support through mutual aid agreements and other informal channels. And whereas, since the first recorded death in 1792, nearly 18,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty. And whereas the names of these public servants and community protectors are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, which was dedicated in 1991 in Washington, D.C. And whereas in 1962, President John F. Kennedy designated May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day, directing that all flags in the nation be flown at half-staff on that date in honor of fallen law enforcement officers and the families they leave behind. Now, therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of the City of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim May 15th through 21st, 2022 as Police Week, and May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day throughout the city. And I call on all citizens to express their appreciation to the law enforcement officers in our community who secure the safety of the public under challenging conditions each and every day. Signed this 25th day of April 2022, Mayor Robert M. Green. I'll give that to you tonight.
Thank you.
And do you have a few words for us?
Real quick. If you're interested in the Black Hawk County Peace Officers Memorial Service, it's on the 17th at 10 a.m. at Waterloo Veterans Memorial Hall. The Iowa State Patrol's hosting it this year, so we'll have plenty of representatives from our agency there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, I've attended the law enforcement ceremony for the past several years now. It's a very touching service. Would love to see the public attend and anyone who is able to join us in honor of our fallen officers in the community. The next is Neurofibromatosis Awareness Month, and this proclamation T.J. Warren has asked for us to issue every year. Unfortunately, he can't be with us tonight, so I'm going to read the proclamation tonight and then give him a few minutes at our next meeting to talk about his story and how what's called NF has affected him and his family. It's a very moving talk, and I hope it gives us a better sense for what this means in our community. So where I'll read Neurofibromatosis Awareness Month and World Neurofibromatosis Awareness Day is May 2022 and also May 17th, 2022. Whereas the Children's Tumor Foundation is committed to educating the public about this genetic disorder, which affects 2 million people globally, including 1 in every 3,000 births, yet is still relatively unknown by the public. And whereas NF affects all populations regardless of race, ethnicity, or gender. And whereas NF causes tumors to grow on nerves throughout the body and can also affect the development of the brain, cardiovascular system, bones, and skin, and can lead to blindness, deafness, bone abnormalities, disfigurement, learning disabilities, disabling pain, and cancer. And whereas the Children's Tumor Foundation leads efforts to promote and financially sponsor world-class medical research aimed at finding effective treatments and ultimately a cure for NF, and is actively fostering collaborative partnerships both in science and industry to speed the drug research and development process through a number of consortia called Synodos. And whereas the Children's Tumor Foundation improves access to quality patient health care and support through its national NF clinic network, its information resources, youth programs, and local chapter activities. And whereas much work remains to be done in raising public awareness of NF to help promote early diagnosis, proper management and treatment, prevention of complications, and support for research. Now, therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of the City of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim May 22 as Neurofibromatosis Awareness Month and May 17th as World Neurofibromatosis Awareness Day in Cedar Falls. Signed this 25th day of April 2022, Mayor Robert M. Green. And again, I will have TJ Warren here to present in our next council meeting. So he'll be here for the special presentation section. And now our second to last proclamation. If I could bring up Andrew Scholl. Andrew is the chair of the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We thank you very much for the work that you and your committee do for us in the community. And I'll read Bike Month, Bike to Work Week, and Ride of Silence Day. May 2022, and the dates are May 16th through 22nd, 2022, and May 18th, 2022 for the Ride of Silence. Whereas Cedar Falls has been declared a bicycle-friendly community at the bronze level by the League of American Bicyclists, and whereas Cedar Falls is implementing a complete streets philosophy for safely accommodating bicycles and pedestrians along the city's roadways, and whereas Cedar Falls adopted the Cedar Falls Bicycle Plan in 2009, and it is in the process of approving a new bike plan to reduce bicycle motorist collisions, educate the public, and promote bicycling for recreation and commuting. And whereas bikeability has been shown to increase home values nationwide and contributes to the local economy through services and tourism. And whereas the annual Ride of Silence is an international bicycle ride to remember cyclists killed and support those injured while riding on public roads, and this event seeks to raise awareness among motorists, the public, and decision makers of the dangers faced by cyclists on our roadways, especially from other traffic. Now, therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of the City of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim May 2022 as National Bike Month, May 16th through 22nd, 2022 as Bike to Work Week, and May 18th, 2022 as Ride of Silence Day in Cedar Falls. And I encourage citizens to recognize the importance of bicycle safety and to participate in bicycle activities and organizations for recreation, transportation, and health during the month of May as well as throughout the year. Signed this 27th day of April, 2022, Mayor Robert M. Green. So Andrew, you have a few words for us tonight?
Sure.
You have the presentation here.
Okay, thank you. So Bike Month is a national celebration, and we can celebrate bicycling culture in our community here locally as well. The theme this year is Bike There, so it really fits with our Bike Network update plan. A lot of dates out there, so Bridges Ride May 14th, Bike to Work Week starting May 16th, and the Ride of Silence on May 18th. Registration starts at 6 p.m. at Overman Park. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to joining. And for our last proclamation for May 2022, it's Historic Preservation Month. And if I could ask to have Rosemary Beach to join us tonight. Thank you so much.
Yes.
So, Historic Preservation Month is May 2022. Whereas Historic Preservation Month was first established by President Richard Nixon in 1973 and later expanded in 2005 to celebrate our nation's heritage through historic places, and whereas First Lady Patricia Nixon noted, as the pace of change accelerates in the world around us, Americans more than ever need a lively awareness of our roots and origins in the past on which we base our identity, in the present, and our directions for the future. And whereas historic preservation in our city is carried out with passion by the Cedar Falls Historical Society, Historic Preservation Commission, Community Main Street, and Central Business District Planning, as well as College Hill Partnership. And whereas the City of Cedar Falls is currently overhauling the city code for the first time in 50 years for zoning, and will continue to preserve historic character while encouraging greater flexibility in the use of land and buildings in our city. And whereas it is worthy and fitting for residents to celebrate the role of historical places in our lives and to reflect upon the shared heritage which shapes and unites us. Therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim May 2022 as Historic Preservation Month in the city, and I encourage all citizens to appreciate the architectural treasures in our neighborhoods and to recognize the strong sense of place and quality of life they provide to residents and visitors alike. Signed this 25th day of April 2022, Mayor Robert M. Green. So I'll provide this to you, Rosemary, as a dedicated stalwart of historic preservation in our community.
Well, I'm glad to accept it. Oh, excuse me. I'm really glad to accept it for all the people who have worked to save some of the historic spots in Cedar Falls, and it hasn't been easy. And I want you to know that, and they've kept up the fight along the way. And I think it's done a great deal for our community. So I'll pass this along to where it should be, maybe the Historical Society, where they can have it at their availability. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. And that concludes our proclamations for, oh yeah, let's give a round of applause. That concludes our proclamations for tonight. I'll swing back around here. Thanks, everyone. I think that's the most proclamations we've had on one night. So with that, that takes us to our next item, which is a public forum, where speakers will have one opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on topics germane to city business. Before going to that, if there's a topic that we'll be talking about later tonight, I would just encourage residents to wait until that topic comes up, because then you'll be captured as part of that conversation, which would be very helpful when people watch it later, at the recording later. But you're welcome to speak both now and then later on as well, if you like. So does anyone from public wish to speak tonight in public forum? Yes, Rosemary. Name and address for the record, please, ma'am.
Rosemary Beach, 5018 Sage Road, a Western Home Community. And I'm just going to make one last call because I don't know. I've tried to educate you all on why it's important we have historic preservation and why we should be wanting to save especially the Searly House on the campus. I have no idea where they are with talking about that within the university. But I'm putting out one last call, and then I think I've done my best to try and make you be believers, is that my hope has been they would take the Searly House and use it for a welcome center. I think our city could stand as two welcome centers. We have the Tourism Bureau, and I have been on that in one way or the other for 25 years. And you know how good it's been to be able to welcome people to your community. You just had that up here 2 seconds ago. There's an importance to drawing people in and saying, oh, this city has something they want to tell us. That Searly House is the perfect place. It is right on College Street. There's room for a couple of cars to park next door to it. The front entry is glassed in. The whole downstairs could be used for kind of a little walk around where you would have pictures of how, and I go back to the orphans home because that's the reason we have the university, is to go walk right through the whole thing. I would hope the Tourism Bureau would have a little corner in there where we would have pamphlets and brochures for the whole city of Cedar Falls and the whole area. It is the perfect place. It is a beautiful building that you can't re-establish there. So I know there was a thought about, making it open space. I think it gives us a lot of integrity about our city and what we think. You're working on College Hill. This is the year of College Hill, if I'm right. It's the perfect storm of doing stuff. So I think I've done the education. If you haven't gotten it yet, you're not going to get it any longer. And so I'm going to go home and rest and just let you mull that a little bit. And let's try and work with the university. You've had one conversation. Try a couple more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosemary. Does anyone else wish to speak in public comment tonight? Seeing none, then I'll consider the public forum closed here. And that will take us over to our special order of business. This is item 10 on the agenda. This is a public hearing on proposed public record requests policy. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So move.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that does pass. And Madam Clerk, do we have any written communications filed for this item?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. For staff comments tonight, that would be Ms. Danielson.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. The policy that's being proposed formalizes our current practices when we respond to record requests. We've never had it written policy. State law requires that most of our policies don't require public hearings, but state law requires that if you're going to adopt a records request policy, then it has to go through public hearing. So that's the reason for the formalness of it. Just for your information, I receive approximately 75 to 100 public record requests each year. Most are simple, but some can be quite involved. So,
Okay, thank you. And do we have any public comment on this item tonight? Okay, seeing none, then I will consider the public hearing closed and bring us over to Part E, which is a resolution approving and adopting Administrative Policy Number 5 relative to the city's public records request policy. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
second.
Motion and seconded, open for council discussion and questions.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Cyrus.
is this not where we were going to charge people to come and they would make an estimate instead of it being free? Isn't that part of this whole thing? That's what I understood, that you would make an estimate on how much it would cost to retrieve whatever they have.
Most generally, if it's a simple request and it doesn't take more than a half hour and any material, significant materials, we don't charge. If it's something that's lengthy, it may take hours of staff time and, a ream of paper, then we would estimate that and charge it. There's not very many requests that we get that are actually involve charges. Most of them are very simple.
Mm-hmm. Is there an hourly charge then on that?
Yes, it goes per the staff rate.
And that was at the state legislature this year to set what that would mean, like for the amount of charges that a entity, a state or a government agency could charge. Do we know what the status of that is?
Yeah, it passed, but it did not set parameters exactly on the rates to be charged, just reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And it talked about actually city attorney review of public records requests. I think there was some movement to eliminate the city attorney charging, but the only thing the statute did was to restrict attorney review to review for confidential or privileged materials, which is all I've ever done and charged with anyway. So substantively, it turns out it wasn't much of a change after all.
Thank you. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, I just always worry when it's a FOIA request. I don't want the money aspect of it to keep people from finding out information. I think that's really an open part of government, and that's what really worries me, is
Right.
that big charge, if there was a big charge. And I do understand the short time frame on the little ones, and those are free, that's great. I'm just worried about the longer term. That was my whole concern about it.
Well, kind of as an escape hatch to that, there is an exception in the bottom of that document that says that that would not apply to requests from either staff or from officials, which we would be included in officials. So if you were to make that request as a council member, there would be no charge for it.
Okay, yeah, my concern was the public.
Well, they could come to you then and say, I want to get this information, and then if a council member believes that it's necessary to receive, you could take that, and then as long as it wasn't confidential, you'd be able to provide that to the public.
Okay, thank you.
To give you an idea, Councilmember Sires, out of those 75 to 100 a year, there's maybe 5 that have charged. So,
Can you think of what the most is, what was charged on it? About hundreds of dollars?
we have had a couple that way, but they were quite involved, and they involved a lot of attorney review for confidentiality.
Okay.
But most of them are, not more than, $100.
Yeah, and I realize that's a little bit outside the scope of what this document is, but I know it's been a question of contention. So just wanted to get that cleared up, and thank you for bringing that up. Yes, Councilor DeBoer.
Well, since number 8 talks about the fee, does this meet the state guidelines then if we don't put actual dollars in there by just saying in I don't know, kind of in summary instead of an actual dollar figure? So it doesn't meet the state requirement?
It does.
Yeah.
The new statute didn't specify particular amounts. It did mention a de minimis 30 minutes, which we use anyway, that we shouldn't really be charging people for taking that little time, staff time.
So we don't need to put the minimus in there because it's in the state code?
Correct.
Correct.
Great. Any other questions, comments on this before we move to a vote? All right, so motion and seconded to approve and adopt Admin Policy 5 relative to the city's public records request policy and requires a roll call vote.
Dunn.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Ganfield.
Aye.
Sires.
Nay.
5 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That does pass and brings us over to item 11, which is a public hearing on proposed amendments to the city's FY22 budget. Is there a motion to receive and file approve of publication?
So move.
Second?
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that does pass. Madam Clerk, any written communications filed on this?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. For staff comments tonight, we have Lisa Roding, and if you would like to enlighten us on this, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight's public hearing is for the fiscal year 2022 budget amendments. This is required by Iowa Code Section 384. It is required to have the budget amendment done by May 31st of each year. We do the similar process with the public hearing, just like the original budget had happened last February. As part of the packet is the public notice, which shows the 9 program categories for public service, which those includes the public safety, public works, health and social services, culture and rec, community and economic development, general government, debt service, capital improvements, projects, and business type activities. The budget amendment was required due to timing of capital projects and participation in various grant programs. Also included in this amendment are the department division line item budget amendments. The increases to the expenditures have been covered by underspent line items or additional revenues and cash reserves. The budget amendment process after tonight's public hearing will be sent to the county auditor by May 31st as required.
Thank you, Ms. Roding. And with that, do we have any public comments tonight on this item? Okay, seeing none, then I will consider the public hearing closed and bring us over to Part 11E, which is a resolution approving and adopting amendments to the city's FY22 budget. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second?
Motion and seconded. Open for council discussion. Questions? Okay, seeing none, then it's been motion and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Dunn.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Ganfield.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us, passes and takes us over to item 12, which is a public hearing on the proposed plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the 2022 alley reconstruction project. And is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So move. Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes and brings us to written communications. Do we have any filed, Madam Clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. For staff comments tonight, we have City Engineer Dave Wicke. So, Mr. Wicke, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Tonight's public hearing is for the 2022 alley reconstruction project. The project consists of reconstructing 6 alleys this year for this project, 3 of which will be concrete alleys and 3 will be permeable paver alleys. The work includes excavation, backfill, and paving of the alleys, removal and replacement of driveways and sidewalks, concrete curb and gutter, subdrain installation, storage and filter aggregate, and the interlocking clay brick pavers. The alleys are prioritized each year based on a number of factors. These include operation and maintenance priority, age, trash pickup, active public concerns, slope, drainage, and proximity to existing storm sewer infrastructure. The total estimated cost for the construction of this project is $500,008, And the project will be funded by the Street Construction Fund and the Stormwater Bond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wiki. Do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak on the alley reconstruction project? Okay, seeing none, then I'll consider the public hearing closed for this and take us to part 12E, which is a resolution approving and adopting the plans, specification, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the 2022 alley reconstruction project. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Motion and seconded. Open for council discussion and questions.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Cyrus.
I would like to see us go to all concrete alleys. I know that the permeables are more maintenance and more money, and we have no real way to check to see how long they're going to last. And with those things and the cheaper cost, we could do 7 alleys as compared to 6. I know that everyone likes the permeable alleys, but I would like to see the money saved and do an extra alley. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cyrus. Anyone else from council?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Cruz.
I'm kind of confused, I guess, a little bit with the permeable the permeable alleys. When you collect the stormwater in a drainage tile and then you funnel it into the storm sewer anyway, how is that helping anything compared to just a concrete alley that drains into the street, curb, and then into the storm sewer? It ends up in the creek anyway. So is there some filtration aspect of the permeable that's making the water a little bit better before it hits the creek, or what are we gaining by doing permeable?
So the water does get infiltrated down through the permeable brick pavers and into an aggregate chamber. So that does have a filtering effect before it gets into the storm sewer system.
So you're filtering out brake dust, transmission powders, and
All sediment,
more sediment than.
yeah, dust.
And then is there is it like a chamber like under some parking lots where you slow the water flow into the creek? Is that part of the element?
Well, the rock chamber underneath, it acts as a storage chamber. So it does, hold back some of that flow before it enters the system, because it acts as a storage chamber.
So along the lines we were talking about earlier about cleaning the permeable pavers, you can clean down maybe the depth of the paver, but the aggregate underneath, once that's full of fine silt, you're not going to be able to clean that out, I would say. Is that not true, or do you then have to dig it up?
No, I think once you got to that point, I think you'd be many, many years down the road with that alley before you'd get to that point where it would have to be reconstructed.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments from council? Councilor Schultz.
Mr. Wiki, and follow up to Mr. Cyrus' question. It's here somewhere. What's the cost comparison between solid concrete and the permeable?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'd have to look at it and get back to you on it.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
didn't Mr. Shaggy say earlier it was 60 to 65,000 for solid concrete and approximately 80,000 for permeable, I believe?
I got 60 and 85.
Okay.
So we'd save about 20,000 for.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Dunn.
I think in this situation, and I know I might be the minority, but we're looking at the bigger picture. We're looking at, again, water is life. So we need to try to keep our water basically drinkable. And we need, as we grow more and have more concrete, I think the thought behind a permeable surface is that it helps slow down. We have these huge rain storms that we, in my lifetime of almost 44 years, it seems like we have heavier storms than we used to. So all these things, it's the bigger picture. I mean, I know it's $15,000 to $20,000, but in the end, it should be slowing down the water and putting less, like, would it be putting less, like, tax, like, I don't know, stress on our system? Does that, am I saying that right? Like when we had these big rains and it hits a permeable surface, be it a permeable alley or a green space, that helps slow the water that's infiltrating into our storm system, right?
It'll slow it down, but it also, the biggest benefit is the filtering factor.
Right. Because it helps to clean up some of that pollutants, right?
It provides a water quality.
Right. So I just want to make sure we're thinking about the bigger picture here. It's an investment in our future, and I know many of us, what do they say? When's the best time to plant a tree? What is it, yesterday? Like, most of us won't see the benefit of it, but we're thinking big here.
And I think it's important to keep in mind that the difference between the stormwater system and then the sanitary sewer system. None of this stormwater is being treated. It's just heading straight into the dry run creeks and into the rivers. So I support efforts to filter that that water that's coming down to avoid having gravel and sediment and debris that shouldn't be going into the dry run creek. And we've seen improvement in dry run creek because of it. And as we look to have the Cedar River be a much more trafficked and used waterway between Waterloo and Cedar Falls, and then with our river recreation project, it's important for us to keep that water as pristine as possible to avoid having gunk come down. And it's not just sediment, but also oil that's coming from vehicles dripping underneath. It's from nutrients. It's things coming out from our yards into the alleys. So the more we can filter that out, the happier our river is. So I don't normally jump in on the conversations, but I think it's a valid investment.
Mr.
Councilor Cruz. Councilor Scanfield first, and then Councilor Cruz.
Just a couple questions, Mr. Wiki. Can you explain for me the aggregate is certainly not drainage tile, so it's going to slow down the water runoff in those permeable alleys. Is the ultimate goal that it would then, I don't know the right word, but it would trickle through that into our groundwater as opposed to run off into the creeks directly?
Well, it gets stored in that aggregate chamber, and then it trickles into a subdrain.
Perfect.
And then that subdrain ultimately goes to a storm sewer system.
So it will ultimately go into the storm sewer system, but much less quantity, and after having been filtered through the permeable pavers and the aggregate.
Right.
Okay. The other question would be why the 3 concrete versus the 3 permeable? I'm assuming there's some runoff concern, so we're putting concrete where that could be a bigger problem, and permeable would be in some flatter spaces. Can you speak to the difference? Why 3 of 3?
So the concrete alleys, I'll address those first here. There are areas where we have ongoing maintenance issues with them, and so we need to have a surface in these alleys. You know, most of them are they're gravel alleys, and they're tough to maintain. They get washed out, and there's some erosion concerns. So it's a constant sort of maintenance type of battle that has to go on with those. And the reason we pave them in concrete is because there might be grade issues. There might not be a storm sewer to connect into closely, like with the permeable alleys, where we can connect a subdrain to the storm sewer. And then there's just going to be a variety of other reasons as well. Outside the watershed, the Dry Run Creek watershed, all of our permeable alleys are in that Dry Run Creek watershed.
Okay, great, thank you. And Councilor Cruz.
Actually, he hit the nail on the head what I was going to ask about. My understanding was that the high-grade alleys are the ones that have the full concrete. The more leveler situations, we'd have the permeable opportunity for the water to come in. So that's fine. The equipment you mentioned earlier, trying to find something, what are we dealing with for something like a big street sweeper, but a vacuum? How does it loosen up the silt that's accumulated in the cracks and that sort of thing? I mean, I'm kind of curious what sort of equipment that would be and the cost. We're looking at $100,000 or something.
I can probably speak to that, Mr. Cruz. I know last year Brian had a machine here that was demoed. I believe it came from Arizona, but it basically looks like a small Zamboni machine that has a vacuum that will suck the material out, and it actually cleans and separates it. in that machine, and then it would allow you to sweep new material in the joints of the pavers. I don't recall the cost off the top of my head of that machine, but
Zamboni machine, is that like a ice machine in a hockey?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what okay.
All right, Councilor Schultz.
So back to the question regarding paving versus the permeable, we have in comparison, spitting in the ocean sort of thing of all our streets in the city that are all concrete or hard surface. Are we looking at anything to do with those in the long run, or is this where we're approaching in the long run or short term?
So, if I understand you correctly, Councilman Schultz, so we have a 5-year alley program, and we look at all the alleys and prioritize them and put them on a list of when we can get to those alleys, or which ones are more critical to pave. And then, outside of our alleys, we have a 5-year pavement management system where we look at our streets in a similar manner, where it needs to be reconstructed or resurfaced based on needs and priority and existing condition of pavements.
So I guess my question is, such as on 12th Street by the rec center, and I believe at the streetscape in North Cedar, will have the offshoots where the water can run off and then naturally filtrate down and not go directly into the stormwater chase. Is that
that's correct.
so there is a plan for overall? Thanks.
Councilor Cruz.
So, Chase, it's kind of like a retention pond for the city, like a retention pond for a development, for a collection of streets, or
As far as the permeable paver system and the chamber underneath?
Well, that and what Councilman Schultz was describing, I'm not fully familiar with the North Cedar one, but it just sounds like you would want to have some sort of a retention pond for the city storm sewers, or some of them anyway. There'd be a lot of water.
Correct. Basically,
to let sediment settle out before it goes into the driving creek.
All of these systems together provide a benefit of metering the water flow. Imagine if we didn't have any of the systems, it would all exit the city into the river at the same time. By metering it and slowing it down, we can control that a little bit.
But there's not many that I'm aware of, big retention ponds for city runoff, as opposed to development.
There's quite a few city-owned detention basins throughout Cedar Falls.
Is there? Okay, I'd be curious where they are.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, or go to a vote? All right, so this has been motioned and seconded to, as a resolution receiving and adopting the plan specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the 2022 alley reconstruction project. Motion and seconded, and requires a roll call vote.
Dunn.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Canfield.
Aye.
Sires.
No.
5 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass. And it takes us to our final public hearing item. Number 13 is a public hearing on a proposal to undertake a public improvement project for the Northern Cedar Heights area reconstruction project, Phase 1, and to authorize acquisition of private property for said project. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So move.
Second.
Motion is seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, that does pass. And do we have any written communications filed for this, Madam Clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So for staff comments again, do we have Mr. Wiki? Here we are, once again with us.
All right, again, thank you, Mayor, Council. This public hearing is for the North Cedar Heights area reconstruction Phase 1 right-of-way and easement acquisitions. The city is currently planning to reconstruct the North Cedar Heights area. Phase 1 will begin with portions of the West Ridgewood Drive and Timber Drive. Project requires some right-of-way acquisition as well as permanent easements and temporary easements to complete the street construction. Project includes installation of storm sewer, water main, sanitary sewer, and full-depth pavement reconstruction with curb and gutter. Plans for the project show the need for fee title and or easement acquisitions from 22 properties. And those exhibits are included in your agenda packet.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wiki.
Thank you.
And do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, then I will consider the public hearing closed for this and take us over to Part 13E, which is a resolution approving a public improvement project for the North Cedar Heights Area Reconstruction Project, Phase 1, and authorizing acquisition of private property for said project. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Open for council discussion or questions. Seeing none, then it's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Dunn.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Ganfield.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass, and that takes us out of our special order of business and into old business. Item 14 is to pass Ordinance 1310, amending Chapter 23, Traffic and Motor Vehicles of the Code of Ordinances relative to prohibiting parking for the College Hill Farmers Market upon its third and final consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Any council discussion on this? Any discussion from the public or questions? Okay, seeing none, then it's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Dunn.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Ganfield.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass as well. And that brings us over to the consent calendar, where these items will be acted upon by a voice vote on a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or the public requests that a specific item be considered separately. And as always, we're very happy to pull an item if you would like. Does any council member request to pull an item 15 through 21? Okay, seeing none. Does anyone from the public request to pull one of the items from 15 to 21 for separate discussion? Okay, seeing none, then I'll read those items. 15 is receiving and filing City Council Committee of the Whole minutes of April 18th, 2022. 16th is receiving and filing Civil Service Commission communications relative to certified lists. 17 is receiving and filing departmental monthly reports of March 2022. 18 is receiving and filing the biannual report of College Hill Partnership relative to their self-supported municipal improvement district funds and an FY22 economic development grant. And very much wish to thank College Hill Partnership for their work in submitting this and for their work throughout the year to improve College Hill. 19 is receiving and filing the biannual report of Community Main Street relative to the FY22 SMID funds and an FY22 economic development grant. And also with Community Main Street, thank you very much for your work to make downtown as awesome as it is. 20 is receiving and filing applications for cigarette, tobacco, nicotine, and vapor permits. And then finally, 21 is approving applications for beer permits and liquor licenses. Is there a motion to approve these items?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those do pass then. And that takes us over to the resolution calendar, where these items will also be acted upon by a roll call vote on a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or public requests that a specific item be considered separately. And again, very happy to pull an item if needed.
Mr. Mayor,
So yes, Council.
23, please.
I'd like to pull 23. That's Councilmember Sires. Any others from council? Okay. Seeing none, does anyone from the public request to pull one of these items 22 through 38? Okay, seeing none, then I will read those other items minus the 23 that Councilor Sires requested to pull. So 22 is a resolution approving and adopting amendments to Administrative Policy Number 7 relative to standing committees. And with that approval, we would see us move to standing committees starting in our next meeting, the second meeting of May. Item 24 is a resolution approving and accepting the permanent transfer of $2.7 million for the municipal electric utility to the general fund of the city of Cedar Falls and $30,000 from the municipal communications utility to the economic development fund of the city of Cedar Falls. 25 is a resolution levying a final assessment of costs by the city to remove snow and ice from sidewalks abutting the property located at 1404 Clay Street. 26 is the same for property located at 603 Fireside Drive. Then 27 is a resolution of levying a final assessment of costs incurred by the city to clean up and remove debris from the property located at 2012 State Street. 28 is a resolution levying a final assessment for costs incurred by the city to remove snow and ice from the sidewalks abutting the property located at 1022 West 22nd Street. 29 is a resolution levying a final assessment of costs incurred by the city to remove snow and ice from sidewalks abutting the property located at 1612 West First Street. 30 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a lease relative to properties vacated by flood buyout programs. 31 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an amended service product agreement with Intercog for project delivery relative to CDBG CV2 funding from the CARES Act. 32 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an amendment and restated developmental procedures agreement with Craig Industries relative to a property located in the vicinity of Independence Street and Lincoln Street. 33 is a resolution approving and authorizing the expenditure of funds for the purchase of playground equipment for Best Streeter Aldrich Park. 34 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a contract with Quality Striping Incorporated relative to 2022 pavement marking services. 35 is a resolution receiving the bids and accepting and approving the low bid of Peterson Contractors in the amount of $7.5 million for the West 27th Street reconstruction project. I should read that out. $7,584,450.61. 36 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of one owner purchase agreement and approving and accepting one public utility easement in conjunction with the 2022 alley reconstruction project. 37 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a surface transportation block grant programming agreement with the Blackhawk County MPO relative to the Union Road reconstruction project. And finally, 38 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an agreement for a TSIP funding with the Iowa Department of Transportation relative to the Main Street reconstruction project. Is there a motion to approve these items minus 23?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor, or excuse me, this requires a roll call vote.
Dunn.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Canfield.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And that'll bring us back to item 23, which is a resolution approving and authorizing amendment to loan and disbursement agreement by and between the City of Cedar Falls and the Iowa Finance Authority, and authorizing and providing for the reissuance of this $4,720,000 sewer revenue capital loan note, Series 2022, and that's 2011 rate reset. Is there a motion to approve the
Motion to
item?
approve.
Second.
Motion and seconded. And Councilmember Sires, you have a question or comment?
I do have a question. Is this the same type of loan that was borrowed from the Sartori Trust, where we went ahead and lowered our own interest rate? This is that loan, or is this a different one?
This is a different one. Same project. I was nodding my head yes, because same project. When we did the big disinfection project, we actually had multiple funding sources. Some was we borrowed from the Health Trust fund, the Sartori fund like you were talking about. We also got a SRF loan with the state of Iowa, and that's what this one is. It's the state of Iowa loan. They contacted us to let us know that they were going to be reducing our rate, and all the action it was going to take from council was just to pass a resolution to get that, and we'll save over $300,000 in interest costs.
Also, my follow-up question is, could we borrow the extra out of that since it's a lower interest rate, and then let Sartori Trust go ahead and invest their money in something else so they could get the higher interest rate and make more money, because we have to protect Sartori Hospital?
We would not be able to go back to the state and add on those funds to this loan. We would not be able to do
But
that.
couldn't we do that in the future? Because Sartori was getting quite a tremendous amount by what I had seen in our financial statement. And we went from 450,000, I believe, just off the top of my head, down to like 100,000.
But what you have to keep in mind right now is for the past year or so, we've been probably earning about 0.3% on our investments. I mean, it's not like we could take the money, pay off the loan there, and then go invest it and get a higher rate. What Health Trust is earning right now on the internal loans is more than we would be able to go get from a financial institution.
I'm just surprised when we borrowed that money out of that trust, we were able to just on our own go ahead and lower that interest rate.
So when we originally did the loan for that project, it said right in there that it'll be a variable interest rate as set by the council, and it will be whatever our market rate is. So when we sold bonds in 20 and got a 1.5% rate, which was an extremely low rate, we won't be getting that this summer, but when we sell bonds again, but it was right in there that we would continue to make it fair. So we didn't want anyone to give any appearance that we were somehow,
either way, whether it was cheating the sewer fund or cheating the health trust fund, we wanted to make sure it's a fair rate that we're charging those loans.
So it's written right in there that you can change that rate,
Yep,
and you did
variable.
that with council?
Yep, it's right. So that's why those come back to council to be approved.
And that was approved by council to
Yep.
lower that rate? Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sires. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, any from the public for it? Okay, so it's been motioned and seconded for a resolution approving and authorizing amendment to loan and disbursement agreement by the City of Cedar Falls and Iowa Finance Authority, and authorizing and providing for the reissuance of $4,720,000 sewer revenue capital loan note series 2011 rate reset. The motion and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Dunn.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Canfield.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us out of the resolution calendar and into ordinances. So item 39 is passing an ordinance amending Chapter 16 offenses and miscellaneous provisions of the Code of Ordinances relative to the use and explosion of consumer fireworks within city limits upon its first consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Motion and seconded. For a quick infomercial about this, to talk about what this would entail, Mr. Rogers, the city attorney, who drafted the ordinance for us, will provide some information about it. So, Mr. Rogers, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At a recent joint meeting with Waterloo, my understanding council expressed the desire that staff come back with an ordinance that pretty much conforms with Waterloo's fireworks ordinance. And so that is what's before you. It amended Chapter 16 offenses and miscellaneous provisions to basically, for the most part, mirror Waterloo's ordinance in terms of the dates and times that consumer fireworks will be able to be used in the city of Cedar Falls. It changes the penalty for violation from a simple misdemeanor, which is a crime, to a municipal infraction. The fine was also adjusted to match Waterloo's too. So those are the provisions that are pretty much together. Also imposed, like Waterloo does, a requirement that our vendors in Cedar Falls provide a notice to consumers of the dates and times that consumer fireworks will be used. And so substantially in conformance with Waterloo's, which I understand that's what council's wishes were. And it would go into effect after the third reading unless council waives one of the three readings. And so the only other differences were minor technical for clarification sake, or Cedar Falls ordinances covered the subject matter somewhere else in the Code of Ordinances, so we didn't need to repeat it. Otherwise, it's substantially similar.
Okay. And for mentioning the remedies as well, a person, how they would appeal is different between us and Waterloo, correct?
Good point, Mr. Mayor. I neglected to mention that for municipal infractions in the city of Waterloo, your due process is directly to court as the state code allows and provides. And so if you were to challenge a citation received under this section, you would challenge it in court before a judge. Waterloo's provision is different. It states it has an appeal process to the city council on a citation for a municipal infraction, which that's just not the way that Cedar Falls handles its municipal infractions. So we want to do that to keep it consistent with the rest of our municipal infractions. But rest assured, folks who would get a citation do have the due process in court to challenge the citation.
But then it wouldn't be a political consideration, it would be a court.
Right. And the practical problem, Mike, I don't know what Waterloo's experience with that particular provision is, but the practical problem is if there's an appeal to the city council, what does that citation mean then when it's issued by the law enforcement officer? Is it held in abeyance? Does it not count until after council reviews? The better process is, like all our other municipal infractions, right to court.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll open it up for council discussion on the item. Are there questions or comments you have for it?
I'll go, Mr. Mayor. That'll
Okay,
go.
so yeah, as sort of it's been our custom, let's have questions and concerns, or I guess questions at the start. We'll then open it for public comment, and then as you want to provide positions or try to sway, that would be the second part. That's okay. So does anybody have any questions from council?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to double check with Mr. Rogers. The municipal infraction for this particular fine would start out at $375, but a second offense would be $500, and then $1,000 for third and subsequent.
Right, so we did increase the penalty to match Waterloo's for the first offense, and then we went over to our own municipal infractions scheme to go 500.
So there is a graduating harder slab, if you will.
There is, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I should have mentioned, Mr. Mayor, I didn't tell you the substantive provisions. So this, if adopted, would allow the use of consumer fireworks on July 3, 4, and 5 for certain times during the day, and not at the end of the year as a state law might provide, because Waterloo doesn't do that either. So the window would be July 3, 4, and 5.
Okay. Yeah, and that would run from noon, if I remember right, noon to 10 p.m. on the 3rd, noon to 11 p.m. on the 4th, and then noon to 10 p.m. again on the 5th, and that's it. Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll open it up for public comment or question. If anyone would like to speak on this item. Yes, Mr. Ray. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tim Houts, 2128 Pleasant Drive. I stood before the council, 3 or 4 years ago when this was first adopted, and it looks like a whole new class except for maybe one, and a new mayor too. But I have been involved in the Cedar Falls Vets Picnic in the Park at the Veterans Park on Waterloo Road for the past 4 years. We serve as many as 100 vets on a biweekly basis. Our veterans look forward to a picnic meal, a camaraderie where they can support each other and learn to live with the emotional and physical wounds of service for our great nation. We invite all veterans of all ages to attend. I represent many of the veterans that carry a wounded spirit from our experience in combat. When the issue of permitting fireworks in Cedar Falls came up several years ago, I stood here and opposed allowing fireworks in our neighborhoods because I, like many other combat veterans, are deeply disturbed by sudden explosions. This body got it right the first time by prohibiting the use of fireworks in our neighborhoods. I realize Waterloo Council permits the use of fireworks on a limited basis. We have a close proximity to Waterloo, which I realize makes it harder to enforce our ordinance. For some, it seems confusing for two communities so close to have different ordinances. The fireworks vendors can be found on many of our parking lots leading up to the 4th. Most of these vendors are from out of our city. The current state legislator seems to want more revenue generated by reducing our local control. As I said earlier, Cedar Falls got it right the first time. The combat veterans thank you for that. When you see a veteran, it's nice to hear thank you for your service. But we need to do more than lip service. That creates a peaceful community around the celebration of freedom for all. If our residents want to experience fireworks, they can go to the big community fireworks displays. Now we can resist state pressures and larger neighbors to change our ordinance. We need to get the word out about our ordinance so that there's no confusion about how we honor our veterans that served in combat, so that all then experience freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Houts. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? Yes, sir, Mr. Sharp. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Rick Sharp, 1623 Birch Street, Cedar Falls. So, Basically, enforcement in the past has been difficult because the calls have been treated as a low priority call, and that was according to your previous director, Jeff Olson. They were non-emergent. PSOs, if they responded, often showed up after the neighborhood show was over, and the rule was always that the PSOs had to catch people shooting off the fireworks in the act of shooting in order to issue a citation. Sometimes PSOs never showed up at all, or if they did, they just gave them a warning, and this is based on observable experience over the years. I appreciate the efforts going forward. Zero tolerance should be zero tolerance. No more warnings issued. Have progressive fines that increase each time the PSOs respond, which sounds like it's going to happen. But I would also recommend this includes following years as well. Dispatch does keep track of previous calls for service for all. So if you have a problem neighbor that shoots off one year, fine them the first time. He shoots off again next year. Guess what? You just got the second fine at the higher rate. So my recommendation for enforcement of this: all hands on deck for enforcement. Use the fireside PSOs to respond and patrol the city. They can use the engines and brush trucks that reduces response times to these nuisance calls. This shows that they are also being productive. That was something that was highlighted about the benefits of this program. Call in the reserve officers to assist. I've heard you mention there's 12 of them. Add that with the PSO, that's 85 personnel for this week, and that should be out in the streets patrolling the neighborhoods and responding to these calls. The city could also block off the calendar for time off over the July 4th weekend like they have for Sturgis Falls and Homecoming weekend. Like I saw on Facebook, the mayor said that the city can use video evidence if the officers cannot catch them in the act. My question is, how clear does the video have to be? Do you need to see faces or just people on the property shooting off the fireworks? Keep in mind this is at night, and most cameras, especially on the phones, don't record well at night, and people will not get too close to those properties shooting off fireworks. If we do allow video evidence, I would say treat the video evidence like traffic cameras where the owner of the car gets the citation, not the driver. Same thing here. Owner of the property gets a citation if the people shooting them off disperse before the PSOs arrive. Other alternatives would be to designate areas of the city to shoot them off away from residential areas like Prairie Lakes Park or Policeman's Park on Lincoln Street. Again, have PSOs patrol or stage in problem areas for the duration of the weekend to allow for quicker response. I think we all know there are certain areas of town that the public seems to gather in the dark of night to shoot off the fireworks. Pfeiffer Park is notorious for that. I live out there. I've chased off a number of people from the ball fields. My neighbors have also called for service out there, and we either got limited response to no response, or after the show is over, someone would come through there. So again, based on citizen input, I would encourage the patrols, fire and police side PSOs to be out there staging to kind of serve as a deterrent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. You've got a few questions about enforcement, and we'll discuss that when we get back into council comment. So does anyone else wish to speak for this item? Mr. White, name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Roger White, 2303 Greenwood Avenue in Cedar Falls. I do not support repealing the ban of consumer fireworks, and I urge the council to reject the proposal tonight. I previously emailed all of you with my opposition to the proposal, including reiterating all the points that I made at the public council meeting in 2017 when this was last discussed. None of those points have been made less relevant today than they were in 2017. I'm not going to repeat all those since you've already received those. I have a few other comments that I want to make. This proposal is not a compromise as it's kind of been portrayed. It will impose on the entire citizenry of Cedar Falls, including the veterans that a previous speaker worked very closely with, the noise, the disruption, the mental and emotional disturbance, the air pollution, the litter, the mess, and quite frankly, the disrespect for fellow residents of our city that consumer fireworks cause. That's just the fact. There were rationale and suggestions in the recent Courier article about why we should entertain this proposal. One suggestion was that the people in Cedar Falls don't really know there's a ban. I can't believe that. If that's the case, then it's the city that's responsible for not educating people. I think that's disingenuous to suggest that people don't know there's a ban in Cedar Falls. The city has the responsibility of enforcement, and enforcement has been pretty much nil. I think probably pretty close to zero. With no enforcement, there's essentially permission to act regardless of what the ordinance is. At one point, I was told, as was reiterated earlier, that an officer literally had to observe the infraction with his or her own eyes in order to be able to write a citation. If that was true then, I'd like to know what will be different this year under the proposal. I mean, we're not just talking about fireworks on those 3 days when you can amp up staff, because the fireworks runs for 6 weeks. At least it has in previous years. So I'd like to know what will be different under the proposal. And another suggestion was offered that there would be so much more effective education provided that if the ban is relaxed. Well, I'd like to know what additional education will be done that has not been done in the past 5 years. The city's record in this matter does not give me a lot of confidence. There was a suggestion that allowing 3 days of chaos would mean that the people infatuated with the noise, the spectacle, the disruption, the danger, the air pollution of fireworks will suddenly become obedient and respectful citizens the rest of June and July. I think that's a stretch. It seems almost laughable to me to suggest that. Finally, the suggestion was made that this works so well in Waterloo, and I guess the inference was that it's going to work well in Cedar Falls also by having 3 days of chaos. Well, let me tell you, I live near the Waterloo-Cedar Falls border in the eastern part of Cedar Falls. And I can assure you that I have heard numerous fireworks exploding to the east of me, so I assume in Waterloo, during June and July, not just on those 3 days. So I question whether it really does work in Waterloo. So for those reasons, I urge you to reject this and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Does anyone else from the public wish to speak on the item? Okay, and then we will have that opportunity, if this passes tonight, to have a second and third reading, and the public will be welcome to comment on those as well. With that, I'll bring it back to the council for thoughts and comments, and if you would like to try to sway one way or the other, this is a great time to do that. So who would like to start us? Councilmember DeBur.
Well, I recall that meeting back in 2017. It was a very difficult one with a lot of emotion involved regarding those who wanted a ban and those who wanted 2 solid full weeks of fireworks. What I'm interested in knowing is why this came back to us at this time. I have not received calls from the public asking to reinstate fireworks, so I'd like to know how we got to tonight.
Sure. So I requested if council would be interested in discussing consumer fireworks because I personally see that it's not working. The ban as it is now is a joke. And I would love to see some change that would allow better enforcement or more efficient enforcement. And also, as I ran, I mean, personally, I ran on a platform in 2018 of allowing a limited window because I believe that was the compromise that we needed in order to have a policy that the majority of residents could live with. I don't like fireworks. I don't buy them. I wouldn't let my kids buy them. But until the state allows us the authority to control the sale of fireworks in our own city, which to me seems like absolute common sense that we would have that authority. Until that happens, we're in the crazy prohibition era, 1929, 1930. And we're in a bad situation that we have to adjust to. So seeing the Waterloo, I don't even know if I would call it a great success I think it's better than what we have. And from what we heard from the joint session last week, it sounded like that was a situation their council members could live with, even the ones that didn't support fireworks themselves. But it provided an opportunity for people to use fireworks in a limited time frame. And where it says, you want to ramp up police on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, that's not really the case. It's the other days that you need the ramping up of the police. It's the 3rd, 4th, and 5th that would be your time to allow the use, as long as it was a legal type. So that's why I wanted council to consider it. It's my prerogative as mayor to bring forward topics that I think are important for the public to consider, as long as the council is willing to discuss it. And we had that council majority to do so, the consensus. So that was the reason. I'd like someone else to comment first, and then we'll be back to you.
Okay, it was just a follow-up to that.
Okay, if it's a follow-up.
Well, I was just curious why you went to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th instead of just the 4th.
So that could be an option, but looking at the weather day, I think that the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, especially the 5th, is important, because if the 4th is a rain day, I don't want people to have fireworks in their house for an entire year that they can't use until the next year, or else we're basically encouraging them to fire it off in the off window in the name of safety. So that's the 3rd. I was ambivalent on, but the 5th I thought was important for safety. So open it up for other council questions or comments.
Mr. Mayor. So first, I will start off with, I as a little girl, my grandpa was heavily involved in the American Legion. 4th of July was a big deal. Usually we participated in the parade, but he never would go to the fireworks. And as a little kid, you'd kind of, wonder why. And so please know that I have the utmost respect for our veterans. And I do know that fireworks displays and loud noises can bring back horrible memories. So to me, this again is more about what you just said. The ban clearly is not working. I mean, I know that sometimes we get thought of as maybe not citizens, but we're all living in this community as well. I mean, in the summer months, pretty much once those fireworks stands go up, it sounds like, I don't know, chaos. And maybe it doesn't in your neighborhood, but my neighborhood sounds like chaos. So I think it's good to also recognize some of the conversation that we had when we were at this joint work session with our neighbors in Waterloo, that many of those folks, I feel like the majority, kind of voiced the same thing where, hey, I'm not for fireworks. I'm actually was for a ban. But what they've learned as they've had this, I think one of them called legal window to participate, because we are, like it or not, because of the change of the state law, we are required, correct, to sell fireworks in the city. So it's not like when I was a kid where you had to go over to Illinois or Missouri or wherever we went to go get illegal fireworks and come back and, it's different. You can just drive over. I mean, in my neighborhood, you just drive down the street. So I appreciated the conversation that we had, because many of those folks, I remember one council in particular, he has a dog that can't stand fireworks. He has neighbors that are veterans. He has little kids that, are hard to get to sleep and hard to stay down. The one thing I remember that person saying is that, well, first of all, there's a few things going off during the day, but mainly there's just a few hours in the evening where, yes, if you don't like those things, it's going to be awful. But like I said before, what we have now, I mean, you could go well into the night and it'd be awful, and at all hours of the day. And yes, enforcement is definitely a issue that was talked about, and I think we'll go into that hopefully in a minute. The other part of that conversation was that I remember was there is a zero tolerance. So there's no putting the officer in the position of, oh, it's your buddy. Nope, sorry. If you're caught after 10 or 11, it's it. You're getting the ticket. And then the other thing that I remember from our conversation with Waterloo was you wouldn't believe how fast that travels when somebody gets a $375 ticket and then maybe a $500 ticket and maybe a $1,000 ticket on social media. So that in itself deters people from not being respectful. And in the end, you know what? It is, to me, about education. It is about safety, and it is about respect. I am like the mayor. We don't, I mean, maybe once in a while I'll buy some snakes or some sparklers, but even those kind of scare me. I mean, I'm not a proponent of fireworks. I do love a good public display. There's another thing is we often get, it talks about why don't we have a city display for fireworks. If I'm not mistaken, most communities that have those, yes, it is in the city, but it's put on by a private entity or somebody who's done the fundraising to put those fireworks displays on. It's usually not the city probably purchasing thousands and thousands of dollars of fireworks. So about the not knowing, I was kind of taken aback because the person who I'm married to the other day when we were having this discussion, and so the whole thing of not knowing, and it's probably because he doesn't go purchase them or fire them off, but he didn't know that there was a ban in our city. He thought it was the same as Waterloo, that there was a window of opportunity. So there are people, the one that I'm married to, didn't know at all until I told him. I think there was a talk about, and I think we'll go into this hopefully in a minute, but there was a talk about overtime being a focus so that police could help enforce and have the zero tolerance. And then, yes, I agree, education. The city has failed on education. I don't know that it was, obviously it's not on purpose, but we do need to do a better job of educating the public, and I think we've talked about that flyer and how every single firework purchase will go home with the flyer stating our rules, and I think obviously that monetary fine and escalation of the fines should be very prevalent on there. But all those things, I guess I don't want citizens to think that this is an easy decision for any of us, and that we don't respect veterans, that we don't respect folks with pets that don't do well with fireworks, and that we don't respect folks with little kids. We all, I feel comfortable saying all of us up here can sympathize with that. But I do think what we have right now is not working. And again, I just remember that certain council person saying, look, I'm not for, against, I'm not, not promoting fireworks, but what we have now is better than what we had. And I remember the police major who sat in on our meeting from Waterloo, specifically having the data saying how the calls have gone down. So, I think data drives things. So those are my thoughts on this.
Okay, thank you. Now, that's a good time to jump over, if I got Acting Chief Howard come forward about the policy or how it would work for evidentiary rules. So in the past, and Director Birdie could chime in as well, in the past, I heard that as well, that the officer had to see an offender in order to issue a citation. But there's some discussion at the meeting Tuesday night, and certainly would want to give Acting Chief Howard a chance to talk first about what that could mean for this year and how, what sorts of evidence would be allowed in order to issue a citation. Does it have to be an officer seeing, or could it be a personal camera providing footage forward and a citation being issued afterward?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you just a little history of it. I was the second shift commander last year. We had 48 calls for service for 4 of us that night, and 35 of them were fireworks calls. It's not about priority, it's just other things happen within the city where we have calls on hold and get there when we can. Also, if you were around that July 4th last year, it was really hard to tell where they were coming from. I myself probably was on 10 different fireworks calls. So we've always said, if we can't see it, how do we know who? It's not about, if we can even identify a household, then we can do some type of enforcement. I will tell you something we ran into a lot last year was Waterloo's flyer. That said fireworks were legal on these 3 days. Now, it also said in Waterloo, but I think 3 or 4 calls I personally was on, a citizen would tell me, oh, I got these over at Crossroads. They said we could shoot them off. You can in Waterloo. So there's a sympathy or an empathy part of it, I guess, from the officers also, where we just lack an educational component. And that's our fault, city's fault, that we, where we didn't get our ordinance out. But it's hard for the officers to enforce something when somebody truly just spent $300, $400, $500. Now, we tell them they can't light them off. We don't want them to light them off. We tell them that. You know, it's just really, I'm just being honest. I had a guy from California who was lighting them off in his driveway. He was right on Cedar, or right close to Cedar Heights Drive, and had bought his at Crossroads. I didn't cite him. I told him, you can't light these off. He had no idea. So that was my discretion at that time. We also wrote probably 10, 12 tickets last year during that time frame where it was clear, blatant disregard to our ordinance. But for us to enforce, I think if we do the educational component, Director Birdie and I have a plan. We do intend to make a zero tolerance policy, and it's not so much about evidence. If you're a neighbor and say, yeah, these guys were lighting it off, that's good enough. It's not even about video evidence. It's just about being able to pinpoint who's lighting them off. And when you drive down a neighborhood and everybody's lighting them off, we ask a lot of our officers when we try to pinpoint exactly which house it's coming from.
Mm-hmm. So. And there was a question from Mr. Sharp about having them apply, if there's a violation, have them apply the next year. Is there a statute of limitations or an expiration date on how those apply?
It's a misdemeanor, so it's a simple misdemeanor. So I suppose there's a 1 year, like a traffic ticket, anytime during that year. So yeah, if you could pinpoint in a calls for service that this is who I talked to on this date, and it hadn't been a year yet, yeah, you could make it a second offense.
Okay.
You'd have to write both offenses though. You'd have to write one for the date from the year before, then issue the second one.
And are those are tracked?
If the officers were able to identify who it was they talked to, yes, sir.
So if they issue a citation in June because somebody was lighting them off, then July 2nd they do it again, that's easily a second violation,
yes,
correct?
Yes.
And then so if it's exactly 1 year, if they get a violation on July 6th, then of 1 year, because it's banned at that point, they're not allowed to shoot them off July 6th. Then the next year, if it's July 3rd, that's less than a year. That would be the $500 fine, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we would have to set up, with enhanced penalties, we'd have to set up something with our community service officers where we could track, like we do house parties, and that's what we would do. So.
Okay. The mic's going to Mr. Rogers. So, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification. So now it's a municipal infraction if passed, not a simple misdemeanor. I'm gonna have to check on this, but I don't think there's a sunset on multiple violations. If I get cited in 22 and then and I'm guilty and I get cited in 23, that's a second offense, or 24, that's a second offense. I'll have to double check. Our ordinance doesn't say that those drop off, so they may never drop off.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And that we talked about in the work session too, about having a property, if you can't find the person who violated, then the site could go to the property owner, just like as Mr. Sharp said, the vehicle getting a ticket from a red light camera rather than a driver. So is that the case here then too?
The language says that the citation shall be directed to the person observed or found to have violated this section. So that's what was discussed by the chief about observation or evidence from a bystander or neighbor. That's direct evidence. It also goes on to say, or the owner of real property on which the evidence, in which the evidence exists of violation. The owner on which evidence exists of violation. What evidence? That would depend upon the nature and quality of the evidence, and what a judge would accept as sufficient evidence. I don't think it's any evidence, it's sufficient evidence to show violation. So it's not just observation, it could be the owner of the property under this ordinance.
Okay.
Mayor, I've got one thing to add too.
Yes, please.
As we talk about fireworks, tobacco use underage, alcohol use underage, the evidentiary and the court things the police have to do are all the same. So, to say you have to catch somebody using the fireworks, you have to catch somebody using the fireworks. Or somebody would have to have video of that person using the fireworks. And when you talk about citing somebody, it would all be about the evidence. So if the owner of the home was there and you couldn't prove who was doing it and you had $1,000 worth of fireworks, sure, you could probably cite the owner. But if you take a rental, for example, and the people take off running, it's probably not fair to try and cite the landlord if you don't believe the landlord had anything to do with it. So we're dwelling on fireworks here tonight, but the rules of evidence and going to court, the officers have to go to court and spend time in court to prove that somebody did it. So if a neighbor had video, we of course could use that, but you've got to document time, date, where'd you film it from, and that takes time. And the fireworks are going off, you got a limited time, the fireworks are going off, and then they're going to end. You only have so many officers, and the calls are coming in, all the other calls are going on in town too. So just as Chief Howard is saying, we got to be realistic about all the other calls going on down in town don't stop. There's activity at the bars, there's people fighting, there's car accidents, everything else is still going on, and the officers make their best effort. So, and we have a plan, and we'll pour overtime dollars into it, but it's just, it's like any other criminal violation, you've got to be able to prove it in court. So. And we'll have officers going to court for months and months over these tickets because they have a big sting to them. So.
And my sense is this first year, if this were passed, this first year would require some significant additional enforcement that we might not see in future years because we would have to set that new standard of behavior.
Well, you would hope. That's an optimistic view. I would hope that too. But, obviously, as Councilperson Dunn and other people have said, a lot of people in the community like using fireworks. The ban doesn't work. And, I helped out the last couple of years too. It's very common to go up behind a house or in front of the house and somebody's using fireworks. There's 40, 50, 60 people there watching it, all the neighbors. And just as Mark said, it's very common for them to say, oh, I thought July 4th, I thought fireworks were allowed. So that was the norm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess, Mayor, when I was talking about the 1 year, I thought you meant somebody who had not been cited. But could we cite them? And if it was within that 1 year and we could prove that's the person we identified, and we caught them a second time in that year is what I was saying.
Okay.
That you'd have to cite them twice. You'd have to cite them for the original violation the year before, and then the current one. Yeah, I'm not sure with what Mr. Rogers is talking about, if there is any, whether they ever fall off or not.
Okay. Thank you.
I
We just have to track who's been cited and who hasn't.
I agree with the chief too on the time between the offense and the charge. That should be brought within a year.
Okay.
I misunderstood what he said. I agree with him.
And the goal then, it would certainly be to have the charge quickly because you're not looking to raise money. You're looking to stop behavior.
Right.
So that's important.
And it's still, officers still have to base it on probable cause. And it's not the fact that it's likely somebody doing it, but it's more than likely. And that's the basis for probable cause. And, and it just gets to a point where I've got a neighbor saying, I just sat here and watched them. And we can get that statement from them. Matter of fact, I'd probably be recording it. That means it's more than likely that person's done it. If the neighbors tell me, I don't know, it's somebody in that backyard, that makes it a little more difficult.
So if an offender or alleged offender receives a $375 fine, that citation they can pay, and it's basically as admittance that they did it, or the option is to go to court, correct, and try to contest it.
Yeah.
So then they're up against the evidence to try to have a judge agree with them that they didn't do it or there's not enough evidence to prove they did it.
Mr. Mayor, I follow up on that discussion.
Certainly.
So you come up to a property and there's 20, 30 people, and it's clearly known by witnesses next door that property shot it off. Then wouldn't it be, if you can't pinpoint a individual out of 40, the property owner would get the citation because don't they have the duty to prevent illegal activity on their own property?
Well, I think you could, but I think it'd be really important where that property owner is. Are they part of the gathering? Are they aware of it? Are they on vacation in Florida? So just like any other, whether it was an assault or a party where you bust and it's underage drinking or underage tobacco, it's all the same. So
Yeah.
you'd have to have a tie. If you're going to charge the owner, you're going to have to prove that the owner had knowledge of it.
A scenario like that, you'd more likely charge the renter.
Well, I'm saying
Or
a
the
homeowner. Homeowner's having a party and they're gone. They went to
Absolutely. They would be charged on a scenario like that.
they went to Fairway to get more provisions for the party.
There's no doubt in my mind if we walked up to a party and they wouldn't tell us who was shooting them off, but we've got a neighbor saying, no, it would be the homeowner.
Well, you got the tubes of, debris and
Yep.
so on. And then along the lines of enforcing, how do you deal with the aerials and the sticks and the tubes and so on that go out there and litter other places, and people that are sleeping or gone come home a couple days later and they see all this stuff in their backyard. How do you give them you have to know who shot them in that neighborhood to issue a litter citation?
Well, we've dealt with those through the previous years. So we've had people on the next morning who called about that exact complaint. And, we would do our best to target, to figure out where it came from and encourage those people to get out and clean up. I know we've had citations where we issued for littering too. But yeah, you would have to make the connection back to where it came from. Sometimes in certain neighborhoods, it's pretty obvious where it came from because they have a real mess in the morning. But if it was just a random bottle rocket in your yard the next day, that would be very hard to probably prove.
Yeah, that's the toughest nut to crack.
So then does the litter violation arise to the 375 first violation of shooting fireworks? It's a different violation, but yet somebody shot it, and it depends when it is, the 3rd, 4th, or 5th, or April, May.
I think usually we would treat that as a littering or a code enforcement violation.
Well, in this case, though, it says in the draft ordinance that any violation of the provisions of the ordinance is subject to a $375 fine, and that includes the littering component. So it's not just throwing trash on the street. If there's fireworks that are found in somebody else's yard, that
It would arise to a different level.
Yeah, because it says it right in the ordinance not to do it.
Mm-hmm. That's how it is.
So you wouldn't have to quibble there.
Yeah.
Zero tolerance.
Yeah, we'd have to go that route.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Schultz.
So kind of along the line of what Mr. Cruz is talking about, I don't know if this is for Stephanie or who it's for, would this be on a rental property, something that would go against the points if there was a citation?
Yeah, we coordinate with the police, and then if there was an issue, we do assign landlord accountability points, and there's a schedule for the type of activity as to what points are assigned.
Do you know how many that would be?
I don't, no.
Other comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Gamble.
Just a couple of things worth noting, I think, from our conversation. As Councilmember Dunn pointed out, Major Leibold with Waterloo PD did say that they decreased their calls for service outside of the window by 52%. I feel that statistic was worth something. I think the compromise here is the optimistic hope that we could minimize the offenses throughout June and later July by giving an opportunity for folks to enjoy and have the freedom to do that. Speaking of freedom, obviously we want to maintain the presumption of innocence, and I trust that our officers could do the enforcement. If this should pass, I think we're all in favor of a zero tolerance policy because that's the only way that this window compromise works, in my opinion. I would also want to reiterate, Acting Director Birdie, you had said that initially your recommendation in 2017 when the state lifted the ban was to go ahead and allow for some. Is that still your opinion today, or what would your recommendation be as our head of police?
Well, that was the recommendation for public safety that year. I can't remember what year it was. Our thinking all along is that, since the state made it legal for sales, we can't control where the sales are in the state. There are people, no doubt, that, enjoy fireworks. So our thinking has always been that hopefully by allowing a legal window, we can control more of the illegal fireworks. That's a hope. It's an optimistic hope. Major Leibold did have some data that shows they're heading in that direction. And we would really hope for the same thing. And the other thing, part of our plan, and it ties in, what the mayor has planned too, is, signage where they sell it, flyers. We've talked about other efforts in social media.
Yard boards.
Yard signs at major intersections, and anything we can do to direct that fireworks into the legal window, because it helps everybody. It helps people to be able to prepare for it, helps the police be able to enforce outside of it, helps pet owners, veterans, everybody. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That's our hope. That would be my recommendation. Again, it's optimistic. We know, similar, I'll just use the same example again. People smoking underage, people drinking underage. There's a certain amount of fireworks that are always going to be used illegally, regardless what the window is. So, in every community.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to follow on, I think it was observed by folks in Waterloo as well as a few other municipalities in the state that this helped the offenders outside that window. Waterloo did specifically say, I think Mayor Hart said, that they had tried a 1-day, a 3-day, a 5-day at various points since the state lifted the ban and settled on this 3-day as the most effective compromise. And they didn't look to make any changes this year because it was so effective and satisfactory last year. So that was the reason why not 1 day, but 3. So I think we try it. As with anything we talk about, we can change this ordinance as we review and make some incremental tweaks if we find that something's not working. If we didn't get success from this program in a couple of years, we obviously have the right to go back and do it differently. But I'm for that compromise. People know when to expect that they're going off, and then we enforce when they're not supposed to be so that people can get 48 more days of restful slumber in exchange for 2 nights of chaos.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Other thoughts, comments? Councilor Cruz?
Mr. Mayor, if this is appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion to amend.
Sure. So that's what already is the motion. So it's just basically calling the question, correct?
Unless he's
He
amended.
wants to amend.
Oh, to amend. Okay, I apologize. Yeah, so what's your amendment?
I know Councilman Ganfield's comments about 1-day, 3-day. Thinking that through, listening to the people concerned about shooting it off, I seriously would like to limit it to 1 day, July 4th. And the reasoning in my mind is federal holidays, Christmas, Easter, Halloween, Labor Day, Memorial Day, there are 1-day holidays. And your activity in this regard for 4th of July should be 1 day. So I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, so there's a motion to change it to the 4th only. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, motion and second, open for discussion.
Mr. Mayor, my concern is again, and I'm not a proponent, like I'm not a yay, let's have fireworks kind of person, but what I took from that discussion was the importance of having the window for folks to do it legally. And I can appreciate the concern, but I think we just need to give it a try with the 3-day window. And the reason I say that also is because, yes, you're right, it is a 1-day holiday, but as is still the working man here, you know, sometimes people have, you know, like say 4th of July is on a Sunday or a Monday or something. I mean, there are times where folks are getting together to celebrate, and it may not be on the actual day. I took away from this conversation that they've tried so many things, and I can just appreciate when people, you know, share what they've learned and they share the data that I think shows what they're doing is working. And in the end, there's always going to be jerks, but we're trying to figure out a way to, first of all, educate folks, hopefully give them a chance to be respectful to their neighbors, and you know, I mean, I don't think that it's people. I think know that there are folks that are affected by loud noises. You know, human beings, animals. In the end, it's about being a good neighbor, which I believe giving this 3-day window can help some folks maybe be a better neighbor. But again, it's also about shutting it off on those times, you know. So at 10:01, you shot a firework. Oops, sorry, you're caught. Here's your $375 ticket.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor DeVere.
I would prefer to just keep the ban, but as an attempt to compromise, I do support all the veterans, and that's why I want to keep the ban. Having it 1 day helps with the enforcement, and I'd rather try just 1 day than jump to 3. So I do ask you guys consider, if you're going to lift this ban, to try to limit the days to just the 1 day.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments for this?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think, we good? Okay. I think that your point about celebrating in a rain day situation I hadn't considered before, so there is some rationale behind that 3-day window. I personally would like to encompass the weekends prior or the after, depending on the year, but we've seen with our ordinances that we cleaned up earlier this year regarding when Christmas is celebrated, that that's really difficult to state in the ordinance. This year, I believe the 3rd is a Sunday, so there's an opportunity for the weekend celebrators, while people that may have to work on the 4th wouldn't be able to on the 4th. So I'd be in favor of leaving it with this 3-day trial run and see how it goes. that's just my 2 cents.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this for one day? Councilor Cruz?
Just a little bit of a follow-up. We run into a situation if the 4th is a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, then there's going to be 3 days in the middle of the week when 2 of the 3 days people are working. And one of the biggest concerns that I heard when I was door knocking 4.5 years ago when I first ran for council, when the fireworks was a big thing, a much more bigger thing in the community, door knocking, was getting woke up. And second shift workers, third shift workers with John Deere plant, we have maybe a lot more of that than in many communities. So I think, and then looking at the federal holiday aspect, many people have one day off. And I think trying that and doing everything else we've talked about with the fines, that would be appropriate because just how I look at it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I don't know if they feel comfortable commenting, but as the experts, would Chief Howard or Director Bertie feel comfortable commenting if there is any concern on their end as far as if we lessened the window?
No, I would say really it's up to the council. For the police, it's a 3-day ban is probably easier on enforcement. That's on the assumption that you're allowing more time to legally shoot them off. So the police, of course, wouldn't be doing enforcement during those, during the hours it's allowed. So the smaller the window, the more challenging enforcement gets. The bigger the window, the easier enforcement because there's more time that's legal.
And I can give you a little bit of stats just from 2021. We had 30 of the 61 calls, or close to 30, not quite 30, but 28 of the fireworks calls were on the 3rd and the 5th. And the other 35 were on the 4th. So there's, for us to do a zero tolerance policy makes it a little weaker when you make it one day. Giving us 3 days, giving us complete enforcement, and I like what Major Leibold said. 10:01, I'm sorry you were letting them off. There's still empathy there, but it's zero tolerance. And that's tied to the educational component that they spoke about with y'all. That would really be helpful for us.
And Mr. Mayor, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but what I took from that conversation is this actual lift of a ban has actually helped everyone to be better neighbors. And again, like Councilman Ganfield said, we can always go back. I mean, it's not set in stone. There is always the option to change the ordinance. Now, I would hope that we'd at least give it a couple years to see if it, changes, especially with the education component. But I just took away that in the end, even though it sounds counterproductive or against what you would think, that their place where they're at now has actually helped their community. And I just hope that we would give it a chance.
Thank you. So I feel like we've heard all sides here on this. Anything else we need to?
Mayor, since there's been an amendment, can the public get a chance to comment?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
I'll have public comment amendment.
Yeah, there's an amendment.
I think Rick Sharp, 1623 Birch Street, a couple comments. So I agree that possibly we look at a one-day window, but we also I understand we have supporters for the 3-day window, but we need to be looking at the calendar too. This year, July 4th is a Monday, and you're recommending shooting off fireworks till midnight, but a lot of people work on July 5th.
Not until midnight.
11.
Till 11, but regardless, but you're going to have your people still shooting off past that time. If you're going to have a 3-day window, why don't you just start the weekend earlier? I'm not advocating for the weekend either, but the 3-day thing, but we need to start looking at the calendar because this year it is a Monday. You do have people working on Tuesday that may not want to be putting up with it all night, shooting them off. And then my follow-up question is, I'm getting confused because I heard some conflicting opinions from Chief Howard and Director Bertie about Chief Howard saying, for evidence, the witness testimony is good enough, the neighbor's testimony, where I thought Director Bertie said, we need to have, the officer actually needs to see it. So I'd like either tonight or for the next session that somebody actually clarifies what the public needs to have a citation issued. And again, if it's video evidence, does it have to be clear? Because like I said, if people are phoning, we're not going to go on that property and film them. And it's going to be dark. You can't see who's going to do it. So I'd like to have some clarification that the actual police department's on the same page with their officers, whether somebody's verbal testimony is good enough to issue a citation, or if, no, the officer really needs to see these people doing it, especially like the house party mentioning where nobody's going to fess up that they were shooting it, so we can't even cite the owner because of rules of evidentiary, whatever the terminology is. But yes, I'd like to start having you guys look at the calendar too when actually New Year's Eve or July 4th falls on, and shorten that time frame, maybe end it at 10 o'clock if it's on a weeknight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that's something we can't hold for the next meeting to look at those evidentiary rules. There's like,
I can answer. You know, really, Chief Howard and I were saying the same thing. You can, somebody's word is good enough, but you're going to want to get that in a statement or recorded on a body camera. There'll be the expectation that that person may be required in court. And how much time are you going to spend there talking with people, conducting interviews, issuing the citation? Because the fireworks are still going off in town all over. The calls keep coming in. So I was just being more realistic in, video evidence is great. You want to identify the person. A statement or a statement of a witness is good enough too. But if you just have a weak statement and that person's not in court and the person comes to court and says they didn't do it, obviously you're going to lose the ticket. So it's like any other. It's like a traffic offense. It's like underage drinking or anything. You need the evidence, to issue good citations and make good arrests. So,
okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? And thank you, Mr. Sharp, for bringing that up. I always have to remember to offer public comment on the amendments as well. Okay. So seeing none, then back to the council. And I don't want to belabor this too much, but if you have an extra
Well, I have a
question.
follow-up question for Mr. Birdie on you saying what makes a longer window more enforceable? Why is 3 days? Because more people are doing it on those 3 days, or?
well, just that the longer your legal window is, in theory, more people would shoot it off illegally, and then the police aren't responding and deal with those. We just deal with the ones outside those hours. So in theory, the more days you give legally, hopefully people are using up their fireworks, and you have less illegal use.
And with 1 day, we're back to Waterloo and Cedar Falls having different policies, which was the whole point of the joint work session, to make sure that we were hopefully going to be on the same page. So with that, we're looking at just the amendment itself, and the amendment was to change the date of use to only July 4th rather than July 1st, or excuse me, July 3rd, 4th, and 5th, so only for July 4th. And this is just for the amendment itself, and we'll go back to the original motion. So all in favor of this amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so I'll need a show of hands for aye. 1, 2, and then nay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that does fail, and it brings us back to the original 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So any final discussion before a vote?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Cruz?
I'd like to comment that our speaker brought up about looking at the calendar. And I think Mr. Ganfield said something to the effect with the Monday being the 4th and a weekend opportunity when people are off work and so on. And this might be something, I don't know, Mr. Rogers could address how we worded in the language, that the 3 days can move to be 2nd, 3rd, 4th. And then when the 4th is a Friday, it could be 4th, 5th, 6th to go into the weekend, so that the days that they're doing it, the people are off work and you don't have to deal with the sleeping and interfering with the work schedule. So how could we put that into the language? It's just adjusted per year?
I can put it in there, but not on the fly like this. I mean, because there's, as Councilmember Ganfield mentioned, there's a lot of permutations to weekends and holidays, and so we'd want to make sure we got this right if we're going to consider making sure we catch a weekend every year.
So then if we leave the language like this, and then eventually when it shows up on, a 4th shows up on a Friday, I think would be the next time, then somebody can make a motion to amend the city code at that point for a 1-year time frame? Or a referral to address that potentially and adjust it for a year?
You could deal with enforcement, but you couldn't just by motion change the ordinance.
Do a referral in May for the coming
Oh, I
Fourth
see.
of July being a Friday, to say we want to adjust our 3-day window to be 4th, 5th, and 6th.
So you're talking about sometime after this season to
Right.
look at the ordinance and maybe incorporate weekend, yeah, a referral could do that, sure.
Sure.
Now I understand.
And the reason I say that is because we want to pass on first motion what will be probably not changed for second and third, because as soon as you change it in the second, you come back to the first. Right?
Correct.
So that's what I was, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm good with that. The only other thought in my mind, and this might be for enforcement purposes, you've got 2 days at the 10 o'clock timeframe and 1 day on the 11th. And I know Waterloo is that, but why don't we just say 11 for all 3 of our days? And Waterloo can choose to adjust it to us. I mean, wouldn't it be easier, Mr. Birdie, to say to all your people 11 p.m.? And they don't have to sit there and say, oh, is today the 4th or 3rd or, you know.
Well, I would say for us for the enforcement piece of it, we'll adjust whatever it is. Really, it's up to the council and probably whatever you think is the easiest message to the citizens.
I prefer the 10 p.m. because of the nuisance ordinances.
Yeah.
That says 10 p.m. Noise should stop.
Yeah.
In general, the city.
Not 11.
Okay, well then, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we have all 3 days fireworks stop at 10 p.m.
So there's been a motion to amend to 10, or drop all 3 days to 10 p.m.
For uniformity.
for uniformity. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, it's motion and seconded. Let's discuss.
I think the concern here is the inconsistency between the municipalities here. I think for ease of experience, since many residents in our metro area here between Waterloo and Cedar Falls are used to the 10, 11, 10, and this year being a trial run, I think we leave it as is, as ordinance is written here, so that we can get the communication out starting when the fireworks sales start. Any further delay, I'm concerned that we wouldn't be able to get a consistent message out there, defeating the entire purpose of getting them communicated to so that we can enforce this. I like the idea of looking at it again when necessary to adjust for appropriate days. In order to do anything tonight, I guess as a point of order, I would have to ask somebody to reduce it to writing so that we would be able to move on with it tonight. I'm not in favor of the 10 o'clock across because you're going to have dark is barely happening at 9, so you're going to want to be able to celebrate fireworks on the 4th, and the 10 o'clock cutoff just doesn't give those people the opportunity. I think I'd echo what Acting Director Birdie had said about the enforcement window. When you give them an opportunity to use their fireworks legally, then they're not going to break it in June. So I think we should leave them as drafted, consistent with the other city for consistency's sake this year, and see how it goes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Sires.
I agree with that. 11 o'clock on the 4th of July, you need to have it a little later on that night. 10 o'clock the day before and the day after. I used to have friends who always had a 3rd of July party, and that way they knew that everyone would have the next day off. So we've got to let those fireworks go on. The 4th of July belongs to everybody, so however you celebrate it, I'm for that. That's all.
Thank you. So the amendment on the floor is to change the time for every night, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, to be 10 p.m. rather than 10 p.m. on the 1st, or on the 3rd, 11 p.m. on the 4th, and 10 p.m. on the 3rd. So changing all 3 to 10 p.m. All in favor? Or this is just for this, and then we go back to the original motion. So all in favor of changing that to 10 p.m. across the board, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so I'm hearing a nay for that. So that does fail. And brings us back to the original motion. So any final discussion? Okay, seeing none, then the motion on the floor is as it was originally written, which is passing ordinance amending Chapter 16, offenses and miscellaneous provisions of the Code of Ordinances relative to use and explosion of consumer fireworks within city limits upon its first consideration. Motion and second, and requires a roll call vote.
Dunn.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeBoer.
No.
Cruz.
Aye.
Canfield.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
5 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And that does pass, and we'll go to a second and third reading. We'll have a discussion in the next council meeting of how you'd want to proceed with particularly the third reading if it passes on the second, or if you'd want to suspend the rules next time and have both in the same evening. So we'll work through that as we get to the next meeting for the second meeting of May. So with that, it takes us over to bills and claims. Is there a motion to
So
approve
moved.
bills and claims?
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Any council discussion? And any public discussion? Okay, seeing none, the motion and second and requires a roll call vote.
Dunn.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Canfield.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do we have any council referrals tonight? Didn't see any in the packet. Okay, seeing none, then any council updates?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Sires.
I want to remind everybody that the North Cedar Food Bank is open tomorrow from 12 noon to 2 p.m. It's next to the water tower on Lone Tree Road. Anybody who knows someone, or if you're in need for some food, it's a great place. Stop out there. My second thing is very short. I've had people contact me about the clarification of the no mow May. And what I had understood and what I told them was you had to sign up to not mow and get the citation. And I would just like city staff or whoever it is to fill us in so everybody knows what exactly the no mow May was. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, I could probably comment on that. So with no mow May, what the council approved by resolution in the last meeting was that the city would not enforce the provision or the ordinance that says that grass has to be no more than 8 inches and weeds no more than 8 inches. And that's the only change for this month of May. There's no formal sign up. You don't need to provide your name or address in order to not receive a citation. We're just not enforcing the citations at all for just the month of May. Picks up again on June 1st. There is a sign up that's has been generated by Laura Walter, who spoke here last week as an expert, or last time as an expert on the system. She's from the Tallgrass Prairie Center, but I don't believe she was representing Tallgrass Prairie Center for that. But she created a Google sign-up form, and that's more just the citizen advocacy to see how things are going and to get information about how much participation there is in it this year. So that's informal. There's no city requirement for it. So if you aren't mowing your yard just for this month, you're going to be okay. What we might look at in future years is making it required. That's something I've seen in a few other cities, that you do have to sign up. And for various reasons. But for this year, we're not doing that. And certainly we'll be very much looking at how things work out for this year to see if we need to have in those sort of extra protocols. But we're not there yet for this year.
Thank you.
Question?
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
And again, there's been some questions or people asking City Hall, well, what if I want to mow my yard? Well, yeah, we're not prohibiting. No mow May doesn't mean you cannot mow your yard. Do what you want to do with your yard. I'm going to mow part of my yard because it's really tough getting up the little slope. Figure out what works for your house. And if you want to participate, fantastic. If you don't, there's no harm in continuing as is. So we're just experimenting this year to see how it goes. And so any other updates? Yes.
Can I go first?
Yeah, please.
Because this is with the mowing. It might be a good time to also point out that for those that do want to do yard work, that the yard waste collections will be extended into May for the $5.
Okay, thank you.
Because of all the bad weather in April.
Yep. And we're learning on this, seeing what other cities have done. There may be some tweaks that we make to help this settle through. I'm curious about what happens at the end of June. I'm not quite sure, or end of May. I'm not quite sure what my yard is going to look like. So how am I going to get it back down to how I would normally have it? Again, it's a bit of an experiment, civic experiment, and looking forward to seeing how we move forward on this. And if that means changing yard waste or something I don't think we'd be able to do that for this year, but in the future, what does that mean for our community to help if this continues on to make it as successful and as painless as possible for city staff? Yes, and Councilmember.
And I guess my update is more of a question from staff to get an update on where we're at with a couple referrals that actually started back in January with the remote parking, parking next to the building, and then whether we continue having a zoning review board or go back to the P&Z reviewing things. I know P&Z addressed that topic, but then didn't make a conclusion. So it was started in May, and started in January. Construction season is starting. We should get some clarity there for people. So where we're at with that planning.
I can send council an email update about the timeline on some of those referrals, but in general, we've made it through a couple of those, as council knows, and the next one that, as we were following the order, was related to P&Z's role with the site plan reviews. Planning and Zoning Commission did discuss that at a meeting and gave staff direction to bring back an ordinance that would include for new developments that they would be involved in the Urban General 2, and the storefront, and then receive reports, I believe it was like every 6 months or so, about what else was happening so that they could be monitoring any other, additions or, smaller projects, how those are going. So that ordinance needs to be drafted. We want to make sure that it's done well and considers how does it work with the rest of the ordinance. And so the P&Z has not discussed a draft ordinance just yet because we're working on bringing that forward. And then we'll move on to the other referrals.
Do you have the dates? Can you get me the dates when that was discussed so I can see what P&Z said?
For that particular item you're asking, or?
When you just mentioned the P&Z or zoning review board.
Related to the site plan review, just that one item when it was on P&Z?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other council updates tonight? Okay, so moving over into staff updates, I have two things I want to note tonight. I just wanted to say thank you to city staff and to our residents for a very successful citywide cleanup during the month of April. Hearing from our solid waste folks, we pulled up 2.6 tons of waste, bagged waste, from our city. And that's a testament to our community's desire to have a beautiful, beautiful town. So whether that was in the Cedar River or Dry Run Creek or in our neighborhoods up in North Cedar, Overman Park neighborhood, and College Hill Partnership all had significant events, as did Prairie West. This has been fantastic to see these efforts go from just being a small, one-off little neighborhood event to being a citywide activity. And I very much appreciate the civic spirit, and considering, I don't want to get too much into big politics, but seeing how we come together as a community, I believe, is the antidote to a lot of the rancor that we see at other levels of government. And so I just want to celebrate that and look forward to an even bigger event. Hopefully not as much trash next year, because we picked it up this year. Please don't put more trash on the ground. But to see that we have a community that cares about being good environmental stewards means a lot, and it's something we can all be very proud of. So I want to give a round of applause for that. 2.6 tons. And then my other item for tonight is today I had the opportunity to swear in a new officer, Dylan Sharnow, and I want to just congratulate him. Welcome to the force. We changed the venue for that. It used to be that the new officers, public safety officers, were sworn in here in the council chambers. And it was a tough decision. I decided I wanted to move that over to the Public Safety Center just because that gave an opportunity for officers and their peers to be able to attend these ceremonies, and also it was easier for families typically to attend as well. And today was a great example of that. We had at least, 20 officers participate and welcome Dylan to the force, and then his family was able to take a tour of the public safety building right after, and really get a sense for being part of the organization and feel at home. So just wanted to note that today, and again congratulate Officer Sharnow, who has a bit of a break now before he has to go to Law Enforcement Academy. He has a couple of hours, So he takes off tomorrow morning and is in Iowa Law Enforcement Academy at Camp Dodge for how long? Is it, how many weeks?
The police academy is 16 weeks.
16. So,
You know, one thing, Mary, you mentioned today, you talked about swearing in ceremonies and retirement ceremonies there. So it's just kind of interesting. Dylan is a replacement for Director Olson. So Director Olson served, I think, 36, 37 years in Cedar Falls. Dylan's 20 years old, just getting started. So kind of interesting. So
excellent, thank you. And along those lines of the ceremony, we typically would want to have a public safety ceremony as part of National Police Week. Right, like we did that last year. It was fantastic, even during the COVID time. I loved having council members present and staff. We weren't able to have public there. This year we want to, but the challenge is supply. we're not able to get some of the certificates, the materials, I think even some badges. Is that right?
yeah, we picked a tentative date today in June, but we won't publicize that yet till we know. But we're having trouble just getting badges, trophies, you know, the things we need to reward our employees. But it looks like we're headed towards an early date in June, and as soon as we know we can do it, we'll get that out.
Okay, and that will be a public event, and we'd love to have folks out to celebrate with us. So with that, anything else from staff tonight? Okay, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much for a great discussion tonight.